Two old gentlemen lived in a quiet street in Paris. They were friends and neighbors, and they often went for walks together in the street when the weather was fine. Last Saturday, they went for a walk at the side of the river. The sun shone, the weather was warm, there were a lot of flowers everywhere, and there were boats on the water. The two men walked happily for half an hour, and then one of them said to the other, "That's a very beautiful girl." "Where can you see a beautiful girl?" said the other. "I can't see one anywhere." "I can see two young men. They are walking towards us." "The girl's walking behind us," said the first man quietly. "But how can you see her then?" asked his friend. The first man smiled and said, "I can't see her, but I can see the young man's eyes." John lived with his mother in a rather big house, and when she died, the house became too big for him, so he bought a smaller one in the next street. There was a very nice old clock in his first house, and when the man came to take his furniture to the new house, John thought, "I'm not going to let them carry my beautiful old clock in their truck. Perhaps they'll break it, and then mending it will be very expensive." So he picked it up and began to carry it down the road in his arms. It was heavy, so he stopped 2 or 3 times to have a rest. Then suddenly a small boy came along the road. He stopped and looked at John for a few seconds. Then he said to John, "You're a stupid man, aren't you? Why don't you buy a watch like everybody else?" Harry and Bob were neighbors, and they worked in the same bank. They were young, and they often went out together. Then the bank sent both of them to a new town. They did not know any other people there. So on the first Saturday, Bob said to Harry, "There is a dance at the Bridge Hotel this evening. Let's go there. Perhaps we'll meet some nice girls." He answered, "All right," and they went to the dance together. They danced several times with the girls there, and then Harry went to Bob and pointed to one girl. "She's a nasty one," he said angrily. "Don't talk to her." Bob was surprised. "Why? What happened?" he asked his friend. Harry answered, "She said to me, 'Do you dance?'" Bob laughed and said, "But that isn't a nasty thing to say." "She said it while I was dancing with her," Harry answered angrily. Sir Jones had a few days' holiday, so he said, "I'm going to go to the mountains by train." He put on his best clothes, took his small bag, went to the station, and got into the train. He had a beautiful hat, and he often put his head out of the window during the trip and looked at the mountains. But the wind pulled his hat off. Mr. Jones quickly took his old bag and threw that out of the window too. The other people in the carriage laughed. "Is your bag going to bring your beautiful hat back?" They asked. No, Mr. Jones answered, but there is no name and no address in my hat. And there is a name and an address on the back. Someone's going to find both of them near each other, and he's going to send me the bag and the hat. Dick lived in Oxford, and he had a new girlfriend. Her name was Daisy, and Dick liked her very much. One Saturday, they went for a picnic in the country, and when they were walking to a nice place near a river, they saw a cow and its calf. Look, Daisy, Dick said, the cow's giving its calf a kiss. Isn't that nice? Daisy stopped and looked. Then she smiled and said, Yes, it is, Dick. It's very pretty. Doesn't it make you want to have a kiss too, Daisy? Dick said, then looking at her. Daisy thought for a few seconds, and then she said, No, it doesn't, really, Dick. Does it make you want to have one? Yes, it does, Daisy, Dick answered, holding her hand. All right, then go and get a kiss, Daisy answered. And I'll wait here. It looks like a nice, quiet cow. George was 6 years old, and he was ill. He was always tired, and his face was always very red. He did not like doctors, but last month his wife said to him, Don't be stupid, George. Go and see Dr. Brown. George said, No, but last week he was worse. And he went to the doctor. Dr. Brown examined him and then said to him, You drink too much. Stop drinking whiskey and drink milk. George liked whiskey, and he did not like milk. I'm not a baby, he always said to his wife. Now he looked at Dr. Brown and said, But drinking milk is dangerous, doctor. The doctor laughed and said, Dangerous? How can drinking milk be dangerous? Well, doctor, George said, it killed one of my best friends last year. The doctor laughed again and said, How did it do that? The cow fell on him, George said. Fred Williams worked in a factory with a lot of other men. They talked and laughed a lot, and at lunchtime they sat together and read newspapers and laughed about the pictures in them. Then Fred married. His wife, Betty, was very nice, but she liked better newspapers than Fred. Every day a boy brought Fred's newspaper and Betty's newspaper to the house, and Fred took his to the factory and left Betty's in the hall. Once or twice he looked at hers, but he did not like it. And sometimes in the evening he said to Betty, Why do you read that paper? I hate it. But last Monday, Fred said to his wife, There was something very nice in that newspaper yesterday. Betty was happy. Oh, she said, That's good, Fred. What was that? Fred laughed and said, My friend Bill's lunch. He brought it to work in the newspaper. Mr. Johnson was a rich old man. He lived in a beautiful house in the country with a lot of servants, but his wife was dead, and he did not have any children. Then he died suddenly, and people said his servants killed him because they wanted his money. But the servant said, "No, he killed himself." The police came and asked the servants a lot of questions, and after a few weeks, there was a big trial. There were two famous lawyers and several important witnesses. "Tell me," one of the lawyers said to a witness one day, "did Mr. Johnson talk to himself when he was alone?" "I don't know," the witness answered at once. "You don't know?" the lawyer repeated angrily. "You don't know? But you were his best friend, weren't you? Why don't you know?" "Because I was never with him when he was alone," the witness answered.